Well, let's speak now to Emily Thornberry, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Emily Thornberry, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us this Sunday. The Israeli government say that these two MPs had accused Israel of false claims, were actively involved in promoting sanctions against Israeli ministers and supported campaigns aimed at boycotting the state of Israel. So they were perfectly entitled to deny them entry.
I think that Israel was really badly advised on this. These are two young women who have huge clout. They're really well respected in Parliament. They're very well informed, highly intelligent young women, and frankly, real leaders. And actually, they speak on behalf of a lot of people, and a lot of people listen to what it is that they have to say. So instead of alienating them, I really think that Israel should try to engage them rather than humiliate them in this fashion. It's such bad news. Israel is supposed to be an ally, and you ought to be able to tell your friends the truth. And frankly, Israel should stop being so thin-skinned and actually listen to the criticism that there is being made of Israel around the world, because a lot of it is legitimate.
Well, they say it's false. That's the reason, isn't it, Emily, that they've barred them. They say they're making false claims. They're actively promoting sanctions against Israeli ministers, and they're supporting campaigns aimed at boycotting Israel. I mean, if parliamentarians in other countries were doing the same sort of thing to us, we would not be happy about those guys coming here, would we?
Look, they were going with CABU, which is a long-established organisation that's been taking people to the Middle East for more than 20 years. I've been on one of these trips myself, lots of people have, and they take them to the region so that people can actually see what's going on the ground as opposed to listening to propaganda. And that's important. You know, we've got a place on the Security Council, we have a leadership role internationally, and our parliamentarians need to know what's going on. And CABU is one of the organisations that helps to inform MPs. Now, as for sanctions, I have to say, I really don't think that the Israelis should be surprised that many of us, and I include myself, believe that there should be sanctions against particular government ministers. There are two extremist government ministers who talk about trying to snatch the West Bank, who talk about bringing it into Greater Israel. How will that result in there being a two-state solution? You know, people who have been, I mean, they condemn themselves by their own words, and for that reason, there is a campaign to have at least two of those government ministers sanctioned, because on the face of it, their behaviour is in breach of international law.
Well, you're talking about Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, two ministers who've been kind of in and out of the cabinet there. You're suggesting that their behaviour is a threat to international law, maybe in breach of international law. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu is subject to an ICC arrest warrant for war crimes, for breaching international law. But yet our government doesn't seem to want to get close to saying some of those things about the Prime Minister of Israel. We had the Foreign Secretary recently when saying that Israel had broken international law, then coming back a few days later saying that, no, actually, he misspoke. They were close to. I mean, that's mealy mouth, Emily, isn't it? You know, these parliamentarians say that they have, and they've been barred from the country, whereas the Foreign Secretary can't.
I think we're talking about angels dancing on top of a pin. Can I just say the principle is this, right, is that when it comes to breaches of international law, when it comes to convicting people in international criminal courts, that is for the courts to decide. There has to be a reckoning at some stage. And it's wrong for politicians to decide what it is that people, you know, whether there has been a breach or not. But what you can do is you can say that there is a danger of breaches. And when it comes to sanctions, when there is prima facie evidence that there is a breach of international law, you can then impose sanctions. So, I mean, that's you know, we can go through this if you want to, but in the end, it's not for politicians to be the court, to be the judge and jury, but politicians can decide that they won't sell arms to a country if they think that there is a risk of international law being breached, and sanctions can be applied if it is believed that there has been that individuals are breaching international law. But actually convicting them of those things has to be done by a court.
Absolutely, and understood. And I'm sure that, I mean, can you tell us, have Abdeslam and Yuan Yang actually gone as far as to say that Israel is in breach, not in danger, but is in breach of international law?
Listen, I don't know. Listen,
okay.
This is not what's it. Can I just say, I really don't think that. I know it's not for me. I mean, it's for you to ask the questions and for me to answer them. I appreciate that. But But honestly, there are so many important things going on in the Middle East at the moment. For us to be debating whether or not people are in breach or might be in breach, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it has to stop. What matters is that there has to be peace in the Middle East. What matters is that no matter how much provocation there is from Israel in relation to the behaviour that they've exhibited towards these two young women, what we have to do as a country is step back, take a breath and say, how are we going to ensure that there is long-term peace in the Middle East? What role can we play in order to ensure that that happens? Because otherwise, if you just get involved in just being involved in these kind of rows or, you know, how many angels can you get on top of this pin this week, you miss the point. The point is that at the moment, too many people are dying. We are moving too far away from there being a peace settlement in the Middle East, and we have to refocus and redouble our efforts and make sure that this happens. Because we can't just keep on watching this happen. I mean, look what happened in relation to those ambulance drivers and their staff. Look what happened there. Why are we not talking about that? Because the evidence on the phone of a dead man that was dug out of his grave showed that they had their lights on, that they were wearing reflective jackets, and that they were going to try to save people who had been shot. And instead, they were killed themselves.
So what is the appropriate response then to the Israeli government for these actions?
I think that the appropriate response is that we have to redouble our effort. We have to talk to the Americans in particular, because the Americans are the ones who can have real leverage when it comes to Israel. I think that we need to make sure that the Israelis understand that they are going nowhere, that they are achieving nothing when it comes to this, that what they have to do is they have to ensure that they get peace and prosperity and security for their people, but they will not have security until there is a settlement in the Middle East, which means a regional settlement, which means recognition by all of their neighbours, and that they are no longer imposing themselves on the Middle East, and there is no longer death and destruction and threat to Israelis as well, and a death to Palestinians. We need to move on, and we have to step away from that, and we have to work on that, and it won't happen without bringing the Americans on board. So that, for me, is the most important thing. Everything we do should be measured against, are we getting peace any closer? If we're not, what do we do instead?
And are we getting any closer to peace? You'll know that many people, I spoke to a lady yesterday from the Medical Aid for Palestinians, who thinks that Donald Trump and the administration have just given the green light to the Israelis to do whatever they want, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, where some 40,000 people have been removed from their homes and where there are more members of the Israeli army now than have been there for many, many years. And that is all because Donald Trump has allowed the Israelis now to do whatever they like. So what can we do to influence him?
I think that there are no serious solutions coming out of the White House at the moment. And clearly, they at least by not putting forward any serious solutions, Netanyahu seems to think that he has simply got a green light. And that has to stop. What we need to do as an international community is say to Donald Trump, there is a solution, there is a way forward, and this is it, but we need your assistance. What we need is for you to have the power of 12 presidents. All the others have failed, but you, Donald Trump, could do this. You could lean on the Israelis, and you could make sure that not just the... No, that's wrong. It isn't the Israelis. It's the far-right government in Israel. Actually, they don't speak on behalf of all Israelis. I mean, let me just put that in, because I think that's only fair. You know, it's not as though there's kind of universal acclaim for this far-right government within Israel. Anyway, the point is this, is that you can put pressure on this far-right government, and you can make sure that they understand that America lines up with the rest of the international community and say there is only one way forward, and that is that you must come to an agreement with the Middle East. You have to be at peace with your neighbours, and the only way that's going to work is if there is a state for Palestine and security for the
Emily,
Israelis.
he's talked about a Riviera on the Mediterranean. What if he's in agreement with the far right and the government? Then what?
Well, I mean, the point is that nobody's going anywhere, right? The Palestinians are not moving out anywhere. The Israelis are not going anywhere. These people are here, and they're here, and their children and their children's children will be there. We have to find a way whereby they can live together in peace. But the point is this, right, is that if Israel wants to have a largely Jewish democratic state, which is what they say they want, then how can you do that if it's one state and the majority of people will be Palestinians? I mean, it's just not going to work. I mean, just leaving it on that basis, you know, so that's why you have to have two states, leaving aside any other arguments, but just simply on their own terms. there's no way that you can have a successful Israel, which is a largely Jewish democratic state, without there being two states. So, it's whenever I meet an Israeli, I always say, or an Israeli politician, I always say, how do you see Israel in 5 years' time? How is this going to work? Where are you going? What is going to happen? That challenge needs to be made by friends, consistently and with clarity, and frankly with some calm, no matter how provocative the Israelis can be at times. Deporting a friend of mine like that, who is an outstanding young woman, I am so angry, and it's quite difficult. I'm having to breathe and calm down and remember what the game is, what the purpose is, where it is we're going.
I appreciate your honesty in that. And final thought then and question. You know these two individuals. How are they? Because I guess they're on their way back to the UK now, so if you can tell me that. And also, I'd like to get you to respond to what Kemi Badenoch had to say this morning to us and to other broadcasters in support of the Israeli government's decision to bar Abdissam and Nuwan from going into the country.
Well, I know that they've landed, and I know that they've got a lot of support from Parliament. I'm on some pretty hot WhatsApp groups. I've spoken to Abdissam directly. She's all right. They're made of strong stuff. I mean, as I say, they're two outstanding young women. They'll be okay. And as for what Kemi Badenoch had to say, I'm completely gobsmacked, really. I just wonder about the logic of this. If her argument is that countries should be allowed to make decisions in this way and that we shouldn't criticise, then I suppose the question is, what does she say to China about Ian Duncan Smith, who's banned from travelling to China and is sanctioned by them, or the Russians? This is nonsense. You have to stand up for what's right, Kemi Badenoch, and you should stand in solidarity with other parliamentarians who were just going to Israel and the West Bank to find out what's going on.
Dame Emily Thornberry, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, thank you very much for being with us this morning.